Welcome to EMDR Chat with Kurt and Michelle. I am Dr. Curtis Roundson.
And I'm Dr. Michelle Gottlieb, and we're very excited for y'all to be here with us, especially because we've often had people say, how can you possibly do EMDR therapy with different populations? And one of the populations that people often ask about is with kids. Like,
Michelle,
sit on the couch. What? Yeah.
Well, Michelle, it would be helpful if we had someone that knew something about that we can interview.
Right? Say like an expert in the field. Wouldn't that be really cool?
That'd be awesome. Who could we ask?
I don't know. Let's see. How about, do you know Holly Forman-Patel?
The name is vaguely familiar. I think she's one of our trainers. And if I'm not, I think she's also some bigwig in EMDR National Association now, but yeah. I don't know. Okay. But go ahead.
So yes, Holly Forman-Patel is with us today. Holly is an amazing trainer and clinician, and one of her specialties is working with kids. So Holly, welcome.
Welcome, Holly.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to be working with kids, how that came about for you?
Yeah, so I actually, before I was trained in EMDR, I worked with kids. So I used to work at Head Start with the 0 to 5 population. So I was working in the preschools in Richmond, California. And then as I was working there, I started to get trained in EMDR therapy. So actually, when I was trained in EMDR, initially, I saw 100% kids. I wasn't seeing any adults initially.
So how was it for you when since you already work with kids and you got EMDR trained? How was it for you? How did you begin to adapt EMDR, the standard protocol, to children, which obviously their developmental phases and where they are, is difficult for them to do what we teach in the basic standard adult protocol. How did you begin to adapt it when you first learned EMDR?
Well, really, one of the most important things about doing EMDR with kids is actually being a play therapist. And so that's actually the foundation of doing any therapy with kids, is you really have to understand play therapy. And so because I was a play therapist, I think I had this really great foundation. But I'm not going to lie, right? I took my weekend one training and I had my OS moment where I was like, oh my gosh, how do I do this with kids? And so I actually went and bought one of the workbooks on EMDR with kids. And luckily, I actually already had a case that I was planning on starting with right away. And so I got that workbook, thank you, Amazon, 2-day delivery. And I looked at what to do. And really the cool thing about it is you're still following standard protocol. So all the things you learn in the EMDR training with adults, you're going to apply to kids. You're just going to be a little more fun. And you're going to really weave in EMDR to play therapy as opposed to play therapy into EMDR, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've had people say, well, how do you get the kid to sit on the couch for like 45 minutes and do reprocessing? Like,
you don't.
You don't.
Exactly. I always say EMDR with kids, especially young kids, it's like that parent where you're sneaking the spinach into the strawberry smoothie. And so you have to really know standard protocol well. Otherwise, one of the big things I see with my consultees is they think that they're not doing it right. They think they're secretly breaking all these rules, and they actually have like some shame and guilt when they come to consultation. But I'm like, no, you actually have your clinical reason why, and you're actually using standard protocol. You're just making it fun and applying it to work with the kiddos.
I know it's a myth, but let me ask you. People have said, well, you can't do reprocessing with kids because their eyes don't cross the midline.
Sure don't. One of the first case I used it with was a boy who was 7. And at the training, they said 7-year-olds can move their eyes back and forth. Totally fine. No, they really can't. They can't move their eyes, but they get distracted a little too easily. And so this little kiddo wanted me to use a little finger puppet of Santa Claus. And so we're doing that, and he had a really hard time with it. And so I had to shift over to tapping. But when you shift, you got to ask the parent. Okay, you do not want little Jimmy after the session to say, oh, and Miss Holly was touching me. Like, that's not going to be good. So you want parent consent. And actually, better yet, and this is a rule when I was in person, I actually shifted over after a few years, is a kid 7 and under, I required a caregiver to be in the reprocessing with us. And that's because having a safe object, a safe attachment figure in the session is actually going to help reprocessing go so much more smoothly. And the parent gets to see me tapping their kid and understands what's happening.
Wise idea. Yeah. Is there anything in particular that you have found in your work and consulting with other people that inhibits therapists from using EMDR with children?
Yeah, perfectionism.
Good answer.
Therapists are so well-meaning. We got into the field because we want to help people, and we're so afraid of hurting people. And so EMDR therapists working with kids, they're so afraid that they don't know how to do it. But my thing is, if you know how to do the standard protocol, then you can do it with kids. We're just going to make very mild modifications. Right? I'm not going to say on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is neutral or no disturbance. And, oh my gosh, right? My eyes would glaze over. But I might say, little Jimmy, is it small, medium, or large?
Good. Uh-huh.
And what people
We're
can't
just gonna
see,
make,
because this is audio only, is Holly did her hands a little bit, fingers close together for little, farther apart for medium, and way far apart for large, right? And we can do a lot of those visual kinds of things with kids, stacking blocks or whatever. So they can, it's more concrete for them because, depending on the age, 0 to 10 means nothing.
Right. Exactly. For some adults too.
That's true. This is definitely true.
And obviously that's one of the major modifications you have to do. Are there other modifications you found that is really important when you work with children as opposed to adults?
Yeah. So for one, really doing it in small little bite-sized pieces. Too often what's happening for a kid is very internal. And we don't realize that we've hopped them out of their window of tolerance. And then the kiddo never wants to do EMDR therapy. Again, how do I know? I always tell my consultees, you all are so lucky because I've made all the mistakes. And so I'm teaching you on all the mistakes I've made. And I used to do that. And the kid would come back and never want to do it again. And so what I say, my rule of thumb is the younger the child, the smaller the amount of reprocessing we're going to be doing. So if I'm working with a 5-year-old, I'm doing 2 to 5 minutes of reprocessing tops. They cannot tolerate it. And it's same with all the phases. We're just going to do little bite-sized pieces and then have lots of fun, lots of play in between. So that's the biggest modification.
And, the other thing I was thinking, because, I started off doing child clinical work, back in the dark ages. And one of the things that's great about kids is that there's less memory network because they're young. And so much of that, the limited amount of time that you may need to do because of their attention span really does cover a lot more territory because their memory networks are smaller just because they're young.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you're thinking, I'm only doing 5 minutes. Am I really doing anything? Oh, yeah. You're doing a lot. You really, really are doing a lot.
Big.
Absolutely.
Big.
One more, the other, I think, would say modification is around being more concrete. Michelle, you alluded to this, where kids are visual. They need to see stuff. And so this is where you get to weave in the different action figures you have, the characters, puppets. All of those things are going to be highly helpful for kids. Even if we look at something like the future template, I'm often acting that out with the kiddo in a session. We're actually physically acting it out, and then we'll do some bilaterals, and then we act it out some more. And so we'll do it with our full bodies, or we can even do it with puppets and other things. But those are the type of modifications you might make.
And I'm going to say something again that should be pretty obvious, but depending on the age of the kiddo, like if you've got 7 below versus upper elementary versus junior high versus high school, it's going to look those modifications look very different.
Absolutely. And really with high school, it's going to be very few modifications. I mean, just don't be lame is the main thing not to do with high schoolers.
So, because they've, as Piaget said, they've entered that abstract reasoning ability, so they're able to hold things in their head more, and it doesn't have to be so concrete.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I love when people go, well, how do I introduce it to a 17-year-old? Like, the same way you introduce it to an adult. It's really not a big deal for the 17-year-old. So, yeah.
And with the introduction, I always say the way I introduce it to a kid versus an adult is actually really, really similar. Anytime something bad happens to us, sometimes they get stuck. And so when we think about it and we still feel icky about it, EMDR can work. Period. That is my fancy EMDR explanation, my initial one. Of course, I'll go into further details later, but initially that's all I say. And that works for a 7-year-old or a 50-year-old.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm gonna ask this strange, but where's the strangest place or the strangest circumstance where you've done EMDR with a kiddo?
Like physically?
Yeah.
I mean, I've done it in cars. I've done it in parks.
Yeah.
I've done it in on the stairs in my, the office building when I was in person. I've done it some interesting places, but I had a clinical reason why I might do this.
Right. Yeah. That's a great thing back when I worked with kids that, therapy was done everywhere, sometimes on a basketball court. So,
absolutely. Bilaterals, dribbling, right? You can
Yeah.
have the dribbling, the bilaterals. There's some cool stuff.
You said car,
Exactly.
and I'm just thinking about all the stories I've ever heard about kids refusing to get out of the car to come to therapy.
That's why. Yep. I did a lot of van therapy over the years.
Right? Absolutely. Okay. So what would you say, is there a youngest age that you cannot, what's the cutoff age?
The cutoff is whatever age you work with. And what's really helpful for really young kids is Joan Lovett's protocol. If you're aware of that one, her attachment narrative. That is the thing to do with younger kids, and it works really, really well. Where basically you are creating a story in the third person around basically what happened to the client. You're using a different name, but it's the same thing, right? So once upon a time, there was a little boy named Jimmy, and he lived with his 2 moms and cat, right? And then you build up and you actually tell the story in a developmentally appropriate way. And then you add in how they're safe now, right? The pieces where it was like resolved. And then you actually read it with the caregiver in the room multiple times across multiple sessions. And then you're doing bilaterals as you read it. And that is a really powerful modification for our young kiddos.
That's very cool.
That's very cool. Now, when adults get stuck, what we call looping, where they're going around, the train's not moving, the scenery's stuck. We teach, in our trainings about cognitive interweaves, which it tends to be more of an adult kind of thing. If kiddos get stuck, what kind of interventions do you use to help the train get going, the information processing train to start moving again? Is there anything particular that is different when you work with kids?
I wouldn't say it's different, but you just have to be more creative. And with all of our clients, adults or kids, you need to know your client. And the more you know about your client, the more you can hone in the interweave. And so with kids, they're often very visual. And so doing like a fun let's pretend one works really well. And I like to use a character that they might like. So like if the kid is into Harry Potter and maybe they're afraid of something, in Harry Potter, there's a magical spell called Ridiculous where you can turn the thing you're afraid of into something silly. And so I've used that as an interweave, and that works really well. Kids work well with shrinking things. So you can shrink the perpetrator and then stomp on it, right? Lots of creative things you can do. Another one that I feel like isn't talked about quite as much, and I use this for adults too, but sometimes kids can't get into it. And so you can actually tell them, okay, I want you to pretend that you're on your iPad and you're watching YouTube and you're watching the thing that happened on YouTube. And you tell me when the video is done. And then you do sets of bilaterals as they're watching it. And that can access some of the material that maybe they can't verbalize. And that one works really well.
That's like one time I worked with a kid and he liked to draw. And so I said, okay, draw it was like a animation cells kind of thing. I said, draw the first scene. And while he was drawing, I was doing nonstop bilaterals. And at the end, he told me about the scene. And I'm like, okay, do the next scene, right? And we went through the whole thing. And by the time we finished all the scenes, it was a 0. Right? So the biggest thing I'm hearing is don't be afraid and be creative. Is that kind of the biggest thing?
Yes, be fun. It's hard to come to therapy as a kiddo. For one, it's usually not your choice, right? So you're being forced to do this thing. There's something wrong with me that happens that kids start to internalize. So we really need to make it fun. And having the caregiver in the room is the other big piece. That can be really important. But yeah, don't be lame. Be fun. I mean, even with the other phases, like with history taking with the kiddo, right? We'll draw it. If they don't want to draw it, I'll draw it. I had a kid once, and you have to get really good at games. he didn't want to tell me the memories, but he did agree that on my magnet dartboard, every time I got a bullseye, he would tell me one memory that we could write down. Guess who had to get really good at darts?
I'm thinking if that's me, I would never have learned anything about that kid.
That's right. But again, that speaks to the creativity and the spontaneity that is necessary working with children, period. But with EMDR in particular, there's that, and as I said, the fact that their memory networks are shorter, so much can be done so quickly. I remember the first time I ever did EMDR with a kid, after like 3 sets of something, they were done. And I didn't believe it. I thought they were just fooling me. And, during the week, kids have nightmares, and we just targeted the nightmares. And in 3 sets, they were they were laughing. So the mother came up to me and says, well, how did it go? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. And then, of course, in between, the nightmares completely stopped. And so that was when I thought, oh, this is a wonderful way to help children very quickly. So they don't have to carry it.
No, it's beautiful. And I think the bigger arching thing is imagine how the world might be different if all kids, when they had a trauma or bad experience, had access to a therapy like EMDR. Think about the healing that would happen.
The wounds that are not carried forward.
Yes. And so really the therapists get worried, what if I mess up? Well, you will mess up in the protocol. You will make mistakes. But what's the risk of not treating these kiddos and not getting them the support and help that they need? This could have a real big impact on their long-term life if we reprocess these memories while they're still little, because they haven't then built up the second-order conditioning to unhealthy coping skills, what have you, for the next 20 years and then get to go get EMDR therapy.
Right, and then passing it on to their children, right?
Yeah. So, and now you're tapping into the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, where they showed that these early experiences are the number one cause for death, disability, and disease in adulthood. And you're absolutely right. Boy, if we can get it early, think of how much better life can be, not only for the kid, but for the community at large.
So, do clinicians need extra training, or can they just do it? What would you suggest?
I would say just do it. I mean, you have the training, and there's a lot of small, quick trainings if you really want one. There's some great books out there, but really the standard protocol is what we use. And so you already have the training.
And I know what I've seen what's gotten in the way of most people is almost that rigidity. And of course, being a child therapist, you got to do the opposite of rigidity.
Yes. Flexible. We have to be like bamboo.
Right. All right. So we've got some major takeaways, but let me ask you, what has ever really gotten in your way of doing this work with little ones?
So luckily for me, I just jumped in and did it right away. So truly, a kid not being in session, maybe that's what's gotten in the way. But luckily, I'm one of those people who had a really amazing first EMDR case with a kiddo. And so I've been all in since the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love hearing that.
Good.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I so appreciate your coming in, because this is such an important population for all the reasons let me try that again. For all the reasons we were just saying, that this is truly about healing the world, and this is a core healing. And if we can heal these little ones, my voice said for years, wouldn't it be lovely if I got put out of business, right? So that's still, that's my goal. So
yeah.
Thank you very much, Holly.
Holly, thank you.
Holly's got some advanced trainings on working with kiddos, and some both on our site and her site. Of course, we always offer you a 10% discount if you're a listener to the podcast. So thank you, Holly, for all the healing you do.
Yeah.